BIONICLE Adventures 4 Legends of Metru. Written by Greg Farshty. Reading by Shadowcaber. Chapter 4 Toa no Kama twisted her body to avoid slamming into a freight sled. Behind her, Vakama and Matau did the same while trying to maintain their grip on items flying through the chutes. It was the height of the Metru traffic rush, and freight convoys were roaring by at alarming speeds. Still, her Toa's strength and agility made it a task she could handle. The real challenge was figuring out where in Metru to go that the Vaki could not follow. Inside the Metru control room that governed the chutes, a very frightened Matoran looked for help, but there was none coming. The Matoran's name was Kongu, and in ages of work he had never run into anything more dangerous than the occasional force sphere or chute breakdown. Now, held in the grip of the dark hunter called Kreka, he knew the true meaning of fear. "The entire system will explode if I reverse the flow," he cried. In the background, Nadiki hissed. Kreka raised a powerful arm so that Kongu could get a hint of his fate if he refused to cooperate. "Then again, it might work," Kongu said weakly. His hand slammed on a button, and with a great whoosh the magnetized protodermis pumps that powered the chutes began to reverse. The Toa's journey came to an abrupt halt. All forward motion stopped in the chutes at once, leaving heroes, Matoran, and freight sleds hanging suspended in the energy field. Vakama and Matau looked at each other and shrugged. Then, with an ear-splitting roar, the flow of the chutes suddenly reversed itself. The Toa tumbled backward, out of control, smashing into the walls as the transport system picked up speed. There was nothing to grab onto, no way to gain traction. Even thinking was difficult with the constant collisions. Nokama somersaulted end over end, catching a glimpse of a freight sled spinning madly and heading in her direction. At the last moment, she and the other Toa flattened themselves against the walls and took only glancing blows from the vehicle. "This can't go on," thought Nokama. "It's only a matter of time before something strikes us. Or worse, we end up back where we started, in the hands of the Vaki." With that fate in mind, Nokama dug her twin hydroblades into the bottom of the chute. Holding onto the blades with one hand, she grabbed Vakama with the other. Then Vakama grabbed Matau, linking them all together in a chain. His motion stabilized, Matau freed his arrow slicer and carved a hole in the bottom of the tube. He looked up to see another out-of-control freight sled bearing down on them. In the instant before it would have struck, the three Toa plunged through the hole and into space. Now they hung in midair, high above Metru. Nokama clung to her hydroblades, while Vakama held onto her ankle. With his free hand, he clutched Matau. "Everyone all right?" asked Nokama. Matau looked up from where he dangled above the city. "Oh, sure fine," he said sarcastically. "Just enjoying the view." Nokama looked down at Vakama. The Toa of Fire was staring off into space. "Vakama?" she said. But Vakama was no longer there. At least, not in his mind. He was lost in another vision. He was standing next to Toa Likan. But as Vakama moved to greet his lost friend, the Toa suddenly transformed into a blinding burst of energy. The sphere of light hovered in the air for a moment before launching skyward. Vakama lifted his gaze to watch it streak across the night sky. As it sped across the blackness, the energy field shifted and changed until it resembled the shooting stars studied by Metru scholars. But it was no random astronomical event. No, it looked more like an arrow pointing toward... With a start, Vakama snapped out of his trance. Nokama was looking down at him, concerned. "Another foreseeing?" asked the Toa of Water. Vakama nodded, a little embarrassed. "How about less vision-seeing, and more Toa-saving?" shouted Matau. Nokama glanced up to see that her hydroblades were losing their grip on the chute. Fighting to stay calm, she began to swing, the movement of her body forcing the other Toa to move as well. Slowly they gained momentum, arcing toward a nearby support tower, and then back again. With each swing, the hydroblades lost a bit more of their grip. At the apex of the next swing, the Toa tools suddenly came loose. Nokama hurled herself through the air and grabbed onto the support tower. But the jolt rocked Vakama and Matau, causing the Toa of Fire to lose his grip. The Toa of Air plunged toward the ground far below. "Matau!" cried Vakama. But the Toa of Air could not hear him over the sound of the wind rushing in his ears. Arms and legs outstretched, He was desperately wishing he had mastered his great mask of power. Unless, of course, it was a useless dumb power like water breathing, he thought. But if it was something like levitation, that would be really welcome fine right now. Even as the thought crossed his mind, his fall became a controlled glide. His arrow slicers caught the wind, acting like wings. A broad grin broke out on Matau's face. "My mask power!" he yelled happily. "I can—" The updraft became a downdraft without warning, sending Matau crashing headfirst into a massive screen. "Ugh! Wind, fly!" he groaned. As he slid down the screen, Turaga-Duma's face glared down from it. "All Matorns should be on the lookout for the false Toa," ordered the elder of Metru. Up above, Nokama felt her heart sink. Somehow she did not think this was what Likon had in mind when he gave them the Toa stones. Nokama took a swift look around. No, there were no Vaki Kiruk in the area, or even many Matorn, for that matter. This seemed like a safe spot for the three Toa Metru to pause and try to sort out what had just happened. Matau spent the time recovering from his first solo flight. Nokama had made a point of not teasing him about it, since the Toa of Air seemed to feel bad enough already. Vakama was off by himself, doing something with a pair of great discs. Nokama approached in time to see him move the discs together until they touched. Then something strange happened. The discs softened and began to merge together. Vakama quickly pulled them apart again, puzzled and intrigued. "Vakama?" "Huh?" said the Toa of Fire, not looking up. "What was your last vision?" Nokama asked. Vakama pointed up to the sky. A yellow streak of light could be seen against the blackness. "That! Toa Likan's spirit star. Each Toa has one. As long as it burns in the night sky, Toa Likan remains alive." "It is headed toward Metru," said Nokama. Matau had joined the group now. He glanced up at the spirit star, shrugged, and said, "What about our captured Toa brothers?" Vakama shook his head. "Only Toa Likan can stop Turaga-Duma and free the other Toa." "And how do you propose we quick catch a spirit star?" demanded Matau. Nokama scanned the area. Down the road, she spotted a Vaki transport vehicle moving slowly through the Metru. The long vehicle was propelled by a series of insect-like legs. Its cargo was a collection of large silver spheres. Only a single Vaki was present, serving as driver. "Perhaps a way has been revealed, rider," Nokama said, smiling. Toa of Water and Toa of Air took off at a run for the transport. When they had gone a few steps, Nokama looked back to see that Vakama hadn't moved. He was still toying with the two great discs. "Vakama!" she shouted. Startled, Vakama returned the disc to his backpack and ran to catch up. As the transport rumbled by, the three of them leaped into the back without being seen. They settled themselves down between tall stacks of silver spheres, the like of which none of them had ever seen before. "What are these?" wondered Vakama. "Storage containers," replied Matau, "but most odd-looking." Vakama brushed his hand against one of the spheres, and his mind exploded. Without warning, the sphere sprung open, revealing a Matorn in a coma-like slumber. The next moment, the Matorn's heartlight faded to black. Before Vakama could react, the Matorn's mask began to blur and morph, transforming into that of Turaga-Duma. A pair of red eyes blazed at Vakama from Duma's Kanohi mask. The Toa of Fire returned to reality with a start. Another vision, and if it were true... He shoved Matau aside to get at the nearest sphere. "Hey, are you cross-wired?" Matau snapped. Vakama threw the sphere open to find... nothing. Nokama joined him to peer into the empty container. "What's wrong, brother?" she asked. The Toa of Fire stared hard at the darkness in the heart of the sphere. "Nothing, sister. Nothing at all," he said finally. Matau met Nokama's eyes and spun his hand around, a not-so-subtle way of saying Vakama was crazy. Nokama frowned, part of her wishing she could believe that. It would make things much simpler. But deep down she had a feeling that the situation in Metru was far worse than any of them knew. Except, perhaps, Vakama. End of Chapter 4.